It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. You can email us as well at randykabc@gmail.com. And wherever you get your podcasts, search for the KBC News Blitz and subscribe to us. We'd appreciate it. There's some good news this afternoon as some residents are getting notified that they can come back to the evacuation zones. They can see what is left of their homes, if anything, and then the rebuilding begins as we're getting a massive hang on these fires. The wind has died down, which means the whole air quality smells like gas. It smells like smoke everywhere. But the Palisades fire, 22% contained. Eaton fire, 55% contained. So we're starting to get a handle on all this. But now it's time to evaluate the damage and rebuild. And that is going to be complicated by the fact that, at least for the Palisades, the majority of people there had lost their insurance policies over the last few years. A lot of them dropped by State Farm, who all of a sudden realized having a Super Bowl ad promoting how great their insurance company is a terrible idea. And now they say they're committing to renewing policies in the Palisades because the pulling out of the insurance market definitely contributed to this crisis, because when homeowners had nowhere else to turn, they went to the FAIR Plan, a plan that was not designed to handle a massive disaster like we've seen. And now the FAIR Plan is on the verge of going under. And what do you know? California's insurance commissioner, Ricardo Lara, made some weird changes to the FAIR Plan just a few months ago that could put you, me, and every single person listening to this radio show on the hook to pay for these fires instead of the insurance companies. For more, we go to ABC7 in the Bay Area.
This afternoon, 7 on Your Side investigates what happens if the California FAIR Plan, that's kind of the last option plan, goes under in the wake of the devastation in Los Angeles.
So specifically here, what impact might it have on every policyholder in the state, including us in Northern California? And 7 on Your Side, Stephanie Sierra.
I don't see how this stops at just this state. If the insurance companies can pass on the cost to us, what says that they can't pass on the cost to people in Nevada, people in Arizona, people in New Mexico?
Is here with more on that. This is a complicated situation.
Very complicated, but both those questions are key in this. As we know, Wells Fargo and Goldman Sachs estimate the insured losses from Los Angeles are now around $30 billion.
And we haven't even really had time to evaluate the damage, so that number is going up.
So we wanted to know just that. If the California FAIR Plan goes bankrupt, what does that mean for the average California consumer, and how likely is that to happen?
You can bet that if the FAIR Plan goes bankrupt, and it's a good bet it will, the insurance companies are going to come after us to pay the debts that they owe.
The California FAIR Plan.
I think we're at a point where the whole concept of insurance is about to blow up. This house of cards is about to fall apart, and I really don't know what we do or what the answer is. But if there is too much risk in covering places like vast parts of California because of wildfire risk, and nobody wants to insure us, or they want to raise the rates to the point where nobody can afford home insurance, what do we do? I do not know.
The California FAIR Plan, the state's insurer of last resort, said this.
I mean, if the answer is, well, we have to raise everybody's home insurance by $10,000 a year, can you afford an extra $1,000 on your mortgage payment? I can't.
Said this week it has payment mechanisms in place to make sure all covered claims are paid. Yet over the last 48 hours, new questions are being raised about its financial stability.
But they only have about $300 million in the bank and $2.5 billion in reinsurance. So you do the math. If
I did the math, that means they're short about $25 billion, according to just the initial estimates.
If Pacific Palisades was totally blown away and they're exposed for $6 billion there, they probably have full exposure.
Jamie Court, the president of Consumer Watchdog, says since 1968, when the FAIR Plan was created, the legislative assumption was that insurance companies are on the hook for the full cost of damages. But he says that...
Yeah, see, the original idea for the FAIR Plan is if the insurance companies who want access to the fourth largest market in the world and the largest market in the United States, if they don't want to write policies in certain areas, well, then they're on the hook if if the FAIR plan goes under. But that has changed recently.
But he says that changed this past June.
The commissioner issued a bulletin in the end of July that says after companies pay another $1 billion out to refill the FAIR plan if it goes insolvent, then policyholders are on the hook for everything after that, which is just crazy.
And it might not even be rate hikes. It might be surcharges, something that they could put on you immediately. This isn't good.
So what does that mean for every policyholder across California?
And that is a big bill. Let's say there's $10 billion that the FAIR plan needs to have repaid. $10 billion divided by 10 million policyholders, about probably how many homeowner policies there are, comes out to $1,000. So are we all going to be paying $1,000? It would be outrageous.
That figure is likely on the high end.
And I don't know what the answer is. I also understand, how do insurance companies make any money if they have to keep paying out these fire claims? So is the whole concept done? Does it no longer make any sense? Are we in a post-insurance landscape where the government is going to have to make everybody whole because there's no profit to be made in insurance anymore? I don't know what the answer is.
That figure is...
That's what I'm going to change the name of this show to. I don't know what the answer is with Randy Wang.
That figure is likely on the high end, and the truth is, we don't know the full price tag the FAIR plan will face, but there's no question we'll all be impacted.
This bulletin exists.
As for the bulletin,
absolutely terrible idea.
There's questions as to...
That's John Garamendi, California's first insurance commissioner, now congressman, who's been very critical of Ricardo Lara, Ricardo Lara has no experience in the insurance industry. He got this job because term limits makes musical chairs out of our elected officials, and he needed a place to land before he ran for something else. And what do you know? He promised when he was running for insurance commissioner, he wouldn't take any money from the insurance industry, and he lied about that. Took plenty of money from them. And what do you know? It seems like over the last 2 years, he's been doing everything he can, bend over backwards to give the insurance industry everything they've ever asked for and more. And they're still pulling out.
There's questions as to whether it's even legal.
It is contrary to the intent of the law and subject to being overturned. He simply ought to reverse it.
Yeah, we might have to get that one through the courts. There might need to be a lawsuit because if the original idea and all the insurance companies knew that this was the plan was if you're not going to insure people and they have to go on the FAIR plan and the FAIR plan goes under, then you're on the hook for it. If the insurance industry got Ricardo Lara to change that so we're all on the hook for it, that's not cool.
So we'll see if that happens. But I do want to point out, Amy Bach with United Policyholders says the cost to California consumers is not set in stone and remains a remote possibility. So we'll see how this all shakes out. According to the bulletin, the insurers that make up the FAIR plan will need to request the commissioner's prior approval to pass on the cost to policyholders. As for
and of course, we know Ricardo Lara is so consumer protection friendly that he'll make sure that you don't pay extra for anything. Oh, wait, he's the opposite of that.
As for the FAIR plan's financial future, a big factor will be determined by the liability of the utilities. We already know Edison is being blamed for the Eaton fire. So if
Well, they're being blamed by a lawsuit, but there is no proof yet that Edison caused the Eaton fire. Now, they very likely could have. It's very possible. They have started some horrific fires with their faulty equipment, Signal Fire, the Woolsey Fire, but what have you. And we know all the fires that PG&E has started in Northern California. But we don't know the cause yet. But it's interesting because if this fire happens to have been started from SoCal Edison, well, there's a lot of liability there. I would assume even the insurance companies could go after SoCal Edison. But if it was started by, let's say, homeless encampment or something like that, I don't know exactly where the lawyers are going to sue. I don't know if you can sue the city for negligence. Believe me, if you could, they would.
We already know Edison is being blamed for the Eaton fire. So if other utilities are blamed, that will play a factor in the future for the FAIR plan.
Right. I mean, you hope that it would be federally backed or something so that if FAIR does go under, and then you also wonder, will these insurance companies just say goodbye to California altogether?
Of course, that's the big fear here. So, we'll be on this for the foreseeable future, of course, tracking what happens.
And this was preceded by thousands of policyholders having their home insurance canceled.
Yeah.
I mean, we knew this day was coming. The cancellations have been rampant for the past 2 years, and that's with Ricardo Lara agreeing to every demand from the insurance industry and more. And now we've had the most destructive wildfire in California history, and the vast majority of those policies in the Palisades, they're on the FAIR Plan. So I don't know what happens next. But we'll be paying attention to it. It would be sure nice to get some clear answers from the insurance commissioner, but Ricardo Lara doesn't like to do interviews that aren't on KNX and that are friendly. So we're not going to hear from him. But you know who is putting his face all over the place because for some reason he thinks it makes him look good is Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom has done so many interviews in the last week. And yes, this is a huge national story, but he's going to places that you wouldn't expect, like Alex Michelson, Fox 11, the issue is statewide. Totally. Meet the Press, Sunday morning. Understandable. Pod Save America, a political podcast, and the Brian Tyler Cohen podcast, a political podcast. Kind of strange. Those are very specific audiences. That is, but they call broadcasting for a reason. Podcasts are narrowcasting. You're targeting a very specific audience, a very specific minded political people if you're going on those shows. But what was interesting was, while Gavin spent plenty of time talking about the incoming federal administration, he was asked about California's insurance crisis on every single one of these shows. And I'm going to hear what he has to say because apparently he's the only one that we can get to talk about this situation, even though he has ignored it for 2 years and said, don't you worry, Ricardo Lara's got this. So without further ado, we're going to go through some of Gavin's appearances on these shows to hear what he has to say specifically about insurance, because this is something that affects all of us. And I don't know what the end result's going to be. I don't know what the answer is. Do we just all have to pay more? That's going to drive a whole lot of people out of the state. Do we have to stop building in burn areas? I don't know. We already built a whole bunch in burn areas. What do we do with those homes? I don't know. Let's go to Meet the Press. Here's what Gavin had to say about insurance there.
As you know, Governor, there are many California residents who have struggled to obtain fire insurance. What happens to these Californians who cannot afford to rebuild?
Well, we created and we had a major issue after the Camp Fire. In fact, I was governor-elect during the Camp Fire, and it precipitated in the largest bankruptcy, or rather, a bankruptcy of the largest utility in the United States of America, PG&E.
That's because they started that fire, and you bailed them out, and then got all the victims of the Camp Fire to get paid in PG&E stock. That worked out great. And now, of course, PG&E said, well, to make sure that these fires never happen again, we're going to underground all our lines. And they have been jacking up rates left and right to pay for that. And now what happens a few months ago, we covered it right on this show. Gavin Newsom puts forth an executive order to examine why electricity prices are going through the roof because PG&E raised rates 5 times in 1 year. And he said in the executive order, we might need to look at pausing certain things like, undergrounding the power lines, which in my opinion, I don't care what that costs. That's going to save us in the end, because if it was a down power line that started these fires, as we have seen with so many destructive fires like the Camp Fire, like the Signal Fire and the Woolsey Fire, well, the cost of those, not just the human cost, but the cost to rebuild, the damage to the environment, every single aspect of these fires, I would argue is way more expensive than just paying to underground the damn lines.
Process of getting them back.
But I'm not an expert.
Process of getting them back on their feet and beginning to underground and deal with vegetation and forest management differently in California, which, by the way...
And again, you told PG&E, okay, you guys don't have to underground. It's too expensive.
California, which, by the way, we've 10x'd the forest management investments in the state since I've become governor. We created a wildfire fund. That
I'd love to know, and we'll probably get into this, as the investigation continues, not only to the start of the fire, but remember what Rick Caruso said the first night. There's vegetation up in the Palisades that had not been worked on in 30, 40 years. Whose jurisdiction is that? Is that LA City? Is it LA County? Is it the state of California? Is it the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy? Or their environmental laws blocking doing anything about that? I mean, managing the brush, especially in populated areas, that's important.
That is around the utility issues. On the insurance side, we did an executive.
There's a siren in the background, but he's in Altadena, an evacuation center, so it's okay.
That is around the utility issues. On the insurance side, we did an executive order a year ago to do climate modeling and to address some of the.
That's not going to help. Because what he's talking about is what the insurance companies already use in places like Florida, where they have proprietary models that they do not make public that show that the whole state of Florida is going to be underwater. So what do? They tripled people's insurance rates. They quadrupled people's insurance rates. And this is true. There are some parts of Florida where people are selling their condos at a loss to get out. You don't hear about this that often, but there are people selling their condos to get out because the home insurance has gone up so much that they can no longer afford their condo. They cannot afford their house. I mean, if we give the insurance industry everything they want, and that's what happens here, again, and I don't know what the answer is. If the insurance companies can't make any money and they can't do business, are we at a point where the whole concept doesn't work anymore? And what do we do from there?
Wildland-urban interface in terms of requiring insurance to be placed before we can increase rates.
Yes, that's Ricardo Lara's plan that he said would increase wildfire coverage up to 85%, except his real plan, the fine details say the insurers can jack up your rates all they want. They have to increase their coverage by 5%. 5%. Not 85%.
We have created a FAIR plan, or at least expanded a FAIR plan, and it has reinsurance. We're assessing, as we do the damage assessment, the total value of the claims, and we will determine what to do after we understand the magnitude of those claims.
Some of these Californians in homes that burnt like this were thrown off of their policies.
Gavin wasn't expecting the national reporter for Meet the Press to be this informed on the California insurance crisis.
Some of these Californians in homes that burnt like this were thrown off of their policies, their fire policies, before this fire season. What do you say to those Californians?
No, it breaks your heart. I mean, this is an issue, and by the way, persists in California because of the acuity of the new realities. Hot's getting hotter, dry's getting drier, wet's getting wetter, these atmospheric rivers, all the flooding that we've experienced.
And if disasters are only going to get worse, how does the concept of insurance work anymore?
In California, but also across the rest of the United States. You're seeing insurance rates through the roof, et cetera. But here's the point. We've been proactive in trying to stabilize that market. That was the executive order a year and a half ago. Insurance commissioner has been moving in that direction. I'll give you a proof point of some of the success of that. Just a week ago, a major insurer announced they were reinsuring in Paradise, California, where the campfire was.
7 years later? So 7 years of rebuilding, and now the insurance companies are coming back.
Because people repopulated. Farmers said they were coming back. So we're very mindful of that. And that's why the FAIR plan is that backup plan. But I'm also mindful of this as someone on the FAIR plan.
Did you know that? Gavin's on the FAIR plan? So now he's got a vested interest in this. Although his case is a little different because he's got money and his wife's got money. So his house burns down. It don't matter if he has insurance.
Intimately aware of how it works. It's not the kind of insurance that you get on the private sector, meaning you're not getting as much in terms of that protection.
It also raises questions about whether or not taxpayer dollars should be used to put people back in these highly vulnerable areas like the one we're standing in right now. Should they?
Well, I to the extent look, the issue here, and particularly in Altadena, some of these homes were built in the 20s and 30s and 40s when you didn't have the building codes that we have today. You can see, and you saw this, the camp was a masterclass at that, in the context of seeing why did these buildings survive, these buildings. It's not in every case. I'm not naive about that.
So we've got to build different. Okay, there's a legitimate thing to say there. Maybe the homes that you have to build have to be as resilient to fire as possible. It's 2025. There's got to be things that we can do.
But the buildings that tended to
so that's going to be even more expensive.
But the buildings that tended to survive were ones that were built after 2008 with a higher threshold of building codes. And so as we rebuild, we will have these higher levels of codes and standards that should help protect some of these communities. But I don't want to say to folks that have been here for generations, 3 generations, living in this beautiful middle-class neighborhood, that now you've got to go. So we've got to do everything we can to protect them. We got to make sure, and it was the case up in Camp where people are repopulating in Paradise, California, that we have a different system of ingress and egress, redundancy as it relates to emergency preparedness, as it relates to infrastructure. Make sure we underground these wires going forward, make sure the community is more resilient in every way, shape, or form.
I'm going to remember that Gavin kept saying on national television we need to underground the wires, because his executive order a few months ago told PG&E it got so expensive you don't need to underground the wires. In my opinion, I think we need to underground the wires, and it doesn't matter what it costs. 800-222-KABC is the phone number, 1-800-222-5222. If you want to comment on California's insurance crisis, do you have an answer to this? How do we get out of this? Is this whole concept sustainable anymore? I don't know. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. We'll take your calls, and we'll hear Gavin on 2 more shows talking about insurance. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. California's insurance crisis is ever worsening thanks to these unbelievable fires in the Palisades and in the Altadena area. The FAIR plan might go under. State Farm canceled their Super Bowl ad because they realized it made them look bad that they canceled so many policies in the Palisades that maybe they don't want to highlight that fact right now. Do you have an answer for what we do to get out of this? How is the concept of insurance still sustainable in the state of California? 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. If you're on hold, stay on hold. We get to you next. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. Your emails as well at randykabc@gmail.com. And give us a follow wherever you get podcasts by searching for the KABC News Blitz. We're taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. On California's ever-worsening insurance crisis, the FAIR plan may go under. Ratepayers for every insurance policy might be on the hook for it. What do we do? Is this sustainable anymore? 800-222-KABC. Let's go to John in Costa Mesa. John, hello.
Good. How you doing, Randy?
Doing great.
Okay. It is not sustainable. A couple questions. FAIR plan maxes out at 3, or a couple answers and responses. California FAIR plan maxes out at $3 million in coverage. A lot of these homes were a lot more than that. So those property owners have to self-insure a percentage. There's a lot of other issues. Talk to me. What questions do you want to know? What do you have?
Well, is it sustainable that based on the new changes to the FAIR plan, the costs are going to be passed on to everybody? How can anyone afford to live here?
The only way we could do it is if kind of similar to what we did back in the 80s with auto insurance. We had assigned risk policies and we had regular policies. In the state, insurance companies are going to have to figure it out who would be an assigned risk, because if you go to, and that would be through admitted carriers. If you went through non-admitted carriers, they're already out of the market. We're talking $40,000, $50,000 a year for insurance for some of these homes. So you would have to do a more affordable home insurance policy within the state, within certain zip codes, areas, regions, and drop it down that way. I've spoken to carriers. I've asked them why don't they do it, and they don't want to. Next question.
Do you think we could get rates to come down if we start severely mitigating risk, like undergrounding power lines and trimming back brush and making it so even a high wildfire risk area isn't as risky?
Absolutely. But on the flip side, I also have clients that in certain areas, I have them install rainbird systems in their HOAs along the back fence lines of their properties that reach out towards the hillsides. Well, here's the problem with that. When you have no water pressure, you have no rainbird protection.
That's what we saw in Palisades, for sure.
In Palisades, of course, that's not going to help. So it's all encompassing. There's a lot of people at fault, and it needs to be fixed. Is it fixable? Not at this rate.
Yeah, not with the people we have in charge. When we come to the
Correct.
rebuilding phase, do we have to think about the kinds of homes that we're building in these areas, or does it even make sense to build in places like that?
Well, a smart home today wouldn't even come to effect because even if you had interior sprinklers, you had no water pressure, so your inside's going to burn down anyway, so it doesn't matter. We'd have to go to masonry.
Oh, boy. Well, thank you so much for answering some of my questions, John.
Non-combustible materials.
Yeah, that might be the way we have to go for it. Thanks for the call, John. Appreciate it. Stone houses, everybody. Let's go. Let's go to Frank in North Hollywood. Frank, hello.
Yeah, Randy, nice talking to you. The guy before me, I guess, really knows his business. But I was just wondering, I don't know if it'll work, but I figured maybe do something like Social Security does. Everybody pays into it, and then as you get older, you're able to claim your, when you have, not older, but when you have the disaster, then you pull the money out. So I don't know how that would basically work, but I think you'd have to do it nationwide. And
well,
then
that's the thing. If we're at a point where there isn't profit to be made in the insurance world, we might have to go to something like that, where it is kind of like almost I'd hate to see how it's run, but a government plan that everybody pays into that then pays out for those disasters, knowing that it's going to be operating at a loss. Because if the insurance companies can't make any money, then they're not going to do business here. That's totally understandable. But if they think raising the rates to a point where nobody can afford a home here works, that doesn't work either.
Yeah, why would you build a home or buy a home if you can't afford to live in it? I mean, living the paycheck to paycheck, most people are in California living now, they can't even buy. My grandkids can't buy a home. They're stuck with me, and I remodeled my house, so I have two grandkids that. They have their husband, and then they live in my house, but I modeled it so they have separate rooms and separate apartments. But, but under the fire, the only thing I could think of would work, but again, just bureaucrats will take it over, is just have a nationwide, like we do earthquake insurance. We can do the same thing with earthquake insurance we have now. We can do it with fire insurance or something that we know is going to be a disaster when it hits. A normal pipe breaking in a house, things like that, you could have separate. But you could have a national type insurance for major type of stuff like fires, earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, and everybody pitches in.
It might have to come to something like that. Thanks so much for the call, Frank. Appreciate it. Look, the reality is that these disasters are getting more common and they're getting worse, whether it's because of climate change or aging infrastructure or bad management. They're getting worse. We know they're getting worse. So what do we do with the insurance market? Let's go to Richard in L.A. Richard, hello.
Hey, great show, Randy. Don't believe that what you're hearing. When they talking $4 million, that's well enough for these properties because you got the land and then the house structure. I'm a contractor. It really is not all that much to rebuild that house. Another thing, these whirlpool systems, that's a great plan with water sprinklers for these type of homes over there because, he's talking about no water, but you got a swimming pool. Okay, those systems have independent, like we got solar. People got to realize, some things in Los Angeles, that's why we pay this. Some of these houses, I was born here, was $7,000, now they're $1 million houses. So you grow your equity. So, you can't blame everybody. Insurance is just like car insurance and and when you hear somebody who don't have insurance, they probably own their own house. So they'll be able to get a loan on their equity. Okay? So don't believe all the doom and gloom that's going out there trying to put people out of Los Angeles.
As a contractor, Richard, are there, materials that we can build these houses with that are more resistant to events like this?
Way better and way faster. You got Plex that I was against that. That was copper. You still have to use a little bit of copper, but those systems last longer than copper. And They're, you got Romex. It's way faster than where you used to have conduits for electrical. And, these old houses, you just don't build them like that. And you have better insulation, better lighting, better efficiency. It's almost not, I'm just saying, I feel so bad for people losing. My brother was an artist, so you got stuff that's it's just, what can you say? All you can do is cry about it. But the thing about it is that rebuilding your house, we Americans, you got all new products. I worked at Home Depot. You got everything as far as to build that house back like it is, and then enjoy life again. It's sad, and start rebuilding your life, because that equity is still something that, I study architecture. It's like, well, this is magic. That only costs $7,000 to build now. It's worth what? It's just the area to rebuild itself. So it's a blessing to be in California. You don't have that in other states, but because what? You got a stadium, you got Hollywood, we got assets, and people got to realize this is only about 5%, less than that of the 1.8 million houses in Los Angeles. So we're not crying for everybody, but we feel sad that this happened. But it could have been prevented, in other ways, because I come out of MGM fire. There's things that we learned. But just like that sprinkler system, that is a great product.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of things we have to think about. Is obviously we can't, go back and prevent this fire from happening, but we can do everything we can to mitigate the damage when these things occur and when these things happen again.
Yeah, Randy, I hate hearing mitigation. Mitigation is mean to lessen the damage. We can't lessen the damage with Zeus up there throwing wind at us, So we got to try to defend against damage and get to work, and because everybody's saying mitigate. No, okay, so let's just stop crying about that, and let's start lessening the pain and suffering, and get this stuff cleaned up and get these houses built. Because I'm telling you, right now the technology, we can build these houses way faster than we're looking at. And the thing about it, they're existing. So it's not to say you're going to build a brand new mansion. You're going to get what you used to have, and a better house and more efficient. For the DWP these are scientists. So Los Angeles City Hall is nothing but PhD. I'm gonna tell you right now, there's no joking about as far as what's going on, how these houses are built, and who's building illegally. You have some of these that cause fires. I'm a contractor. Why would you have? Well, I'm not going to go into that. Okay, but great show, Randy.
Richard, always appreciate you calling in. You give me a sparkle of hope with your optimism. I love it. Thanks so much for the call. 800-222-KABC is the phone number, 1-800-222-5222. As we discuss California's insurance crisis, it's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Let's go to Adam in Huntington Beach. Adam, hello.
Hi, Randy. I've been thinking about this for a couple of days myself. It's a good topic. And I believe that the answer is boutique congregate living. We're already starting to see boutique congregate living. We see it at the motion picture.
Like a retirement home?
No, but there would be various services, levels of acuity, levels of lifestyle. For example, I
like
Orange
my home.
County.
Sorry, Adam. Thanks so much for the call. We're late for a break. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Let's get back to the phones and go to Irene in Sunland. Irene, hello.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, you had a caller a few days ago that had some connections, or he knew someone that worked for SoCal Edison, and he was leaving California. He was upset what was going on, but he said there's like an overload, like with the electric cars, and that could cause that surge or whatever they call that, and cause a fire with these wires. But also, I want to comment on why can't they have some kind of patrolling of the area, or they can't fly the helicopters because of the heavy winds or whatever, but have some kind of or cameras to monitor those where those towers are. I don't know how many towers they are. I mean, it's just where the towers are, where it was sparking. How come they didn't monitor those areas? Because I saw the footage that it showed on TV that they believe that's where it started, and that was SoCal Edison.
Well,
I don't know if they're working on the wires.
Well, the utility claims that what they do is they monitor the voltage, they monitor the current. So if there is a spark or something, they would see that from the electrical output. Now, we have to make sure that they're totally transparent with us and they're sharing that information with us. But that's one way that they say they monitor these things. Irene, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. One more on this. Let's go to Bill in La Cañada. Bill, hello.
Hey, Randy, at least in the short term, based on the growing estimates of the losses from this disaster, we're going to end up with some kind of federal commission that was formed to bail out New York City after the 9/11 attacks, because it's just overwhelming the entire structure, including these are national insurance companies. They're not going to be able to get capitalization for all this. So look for the federal government to bail us out. I mean, there's just no other alternative, in my opinion.
I think that's where we might be. I mean, who can pay for all of this outside of the federal government? Which means, of course, that's borrowing more or taxing more or something. But I don't know what other entity would be large enough to deal with this. State Farm didn't have $30 billion.
No way.
Thanks so much for the call, Bill. Appreciate it. Although it is interesting that they had to cancel that Super Bowl ad, because the optics of we canceled 70,000 policies in California last year, but we have the money to pay for a Super Bowl ad, that wasn't going to go over very well. Well, once again, a very interesting discussion. We'll be keeping on this issue until we get some resolution. But I think we're finally at a point where the emergency is ending. The fires are getting put out. I think tomorrow, first happy hour of 2025. It's time to enjoy ourselves. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you tomorrow at 5 for another News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC.